Darrell, John, thanks for joining us on Hub Dialogues. It's a real pleasure.
Great to be here, Harrison.
And congratulations on the book, Breaking Point. How many books have you guys written together now?
Three,
Yes.
I think, yes.
3, beautiful.
We're starting to lose track.
That's how you know it's a good partnership. Easy question off the top. Is Canada in crisis?
Look, you can point to times in Canada's history when we were in greater crisis. The conscription crises of First and Second World War, the crisis of 1864, when it looked as though Canada might be annexed by the United States. The referendum crises, especially the one of 1995, where we almost lost the country. So the country it's not just sort of sailed along without any incident until now, but we are in a unique situation here. And I think if I can gloriously mix the metaphor that we've been using, Canada has kicked so many cans down the road for so long that now the chickens are finally coming home to roost.
This is the feeling I got reading your book. The sentiment I took throughout was we've taken things for granted. There's a sense of complacency, Darrell, whether it's our belief that the Federation would hold, that you didn't have to feed that relationship, that people would just be happy no matter what, no matter the number of immigrants coming into the country, that we'd always have this steadfast ally in the U.S. Is that the idea you had while writing it, this idea of Canadian complacency running through the last few years in Canada?
Yeah, and it's something that John and I have been talking about for a long time, that the country has changed in ways that the people who purport to run the country don't understand. And, the big shift, when our first book together, we talked about how the power economically and politically was moving west. Still the Laurentian consensus and the Laurentian elite believe that we're, living in the 1930s and we no longer are, that our relationship with the United States is one of not partnership, but dependency. When it comes to defense and it comes to our trading relationship. And this is the point that Donald Trump made. And, my opening thought when we were starting into this book, and we wrote it really quickly because both of us were feeling very similarly, was that, George Grant, who you guys have had a whole series about this year, the 60th anniversary of Lament for a Nation, regardless of what you think of the book, he asked one really interesting question, and it wasn't even the main question in the book, but he asked one really interesting question, which was, are Canadians a unique species on the North American continent? And when I was rereading that a few months ago before we started into this, I thought, that is the question. Are we willing to do what is necessary in order to preserve that independence?
This is if to save something, you have to have something to save in the first place.
Yeah.
It's hopefully distinct.
And Donald Trump just simply sharpened the discussion. But it was, as John quite eloquently put, those cans were being kicked down the road, those cans that were so elemental to us staying together as a nation and us really not appreciating what a fight it is to maintain our independent situation on the northern half of the 49th parallel.
And I think that's absolutely true. But much of that was true when we wrote The Big Shift,
Yes.
more than a decade ago. But, and we don't want to sound partisan here, but things have certainly accelerated over the last decade. The problems with defense have gotten much, much worse. The problems with immigration have gotten much, much worse. Indigenous relationships, we're struggling with that. We broke the immigration system. Federal-provincial relations are strained in a way they've never been before. And then, at that moment, Donald Trump comes along and says, "You guys aren't even a country. Why do you even bother? Let's just annex. We'll make you a great, big, beautiful state." And now suddenly, we have to confront all of these questions, and what both short term and long term, and find an answer.
John, people are noticing Trump. Are they noticing the underlying issues that we have to confront, though? Or are they just noticing the comical figure in front of them?
There certainly seems to be an understanding that if we're going to make our way, there are two things we have to do. First of all, while always recognizing that we will be the major trading partner with the United States, or they will be ours, that we have to diversify. We need to sell into markets that we've been too lazy to sell into in the past. And that means getting businesses out there, signing contracts. And it means building the infrastructure that allows us to get oil and gas and other natural resources and agriculture to markets that want them. And it means, yes, let's get serious about defense. Finally, let's create a defense capability, not against the United States, because that's never going to happen, but one that allows us to robustly defend our north, because we are a border nation with Russia, and to become a reliable partner of NATO and increasingly of security relationships that are forming in the Pacific region as well, because we are every bit as much a Pacific country as we are an Atlantic one. So those aspects, I think, are starting to come together. Other aspects in terms of how we reform the economy and how we deal with regional alienations, those I think we are still kicking down the road.
Darrell, let's talk about the regional alienation, because I love this line. Canada is not a love story, you say. It is a marriage of convenience, a survival strategy, a nation held together not by a shared vision, but by barely managed tensions. Can you speak to that, the fragility of that relationship?
It has been ever thus. I mean, the country came together under exactly the circumstances that are described in that line. And, you know, when the way that it happened was in a similar situation to the one that we're in today, where a threat from south of the border has made us consider whether or not we want to be a nation together. And back in the 1860s, we were blessed with political leadership in this country that was able to say, you know what, everybody a glass half full. It may not be perfect, but we're better together than we are as part of that. And it took a really special way of looking at that situation to come up with that solution and to create the country of Canada. I'm not saying that we're going to go through exactly the same kind of thing now, but if you take a look at what's happening in terms of national unity in Canada, by the way, we're drifting into these things rather than these things just happening sharply all at once, and they've been drifting for a while.
You even go as far to say that we're living in separate realities, that each day
Yeah.
people in different provinces and territories are becoming less alike. Does it feel like that sometimes when you're doing a book tour right now? When you travel to different parts of the country, does it feel like you're almost in another country?
Well, go to downtown Halifax, but don't go to downtown Halifax. Go to, Annapolis Royal and ask yourself if you're in downtown Toronto. I mean, no.
Yeah.
Are the people...
And they might not think so fondly of the people living here.
Then go to downtown Calgary, or better still, go to Red Deer. Or go to, Surrey in British Columbia, or go to, Churchill in Manitoba, or wherever you want to go. These are very different circumstances, even though, Halifax and Victoria are both on oceans, very different situations in both of those places. And the problem that we've got is we've got a system that's been set up to accommodate one type of difference. And that one type of difference is the difference between Quebec and the rest of the country. And the Laurentian Consensus is really about that. That was the animating aspect of what Canadian politics was about until very recently. And what's happened is that the divisions in the country have become more pronounced as we've moved to Western Canada, taking on more demographic power, and as a result, more political power, and definitely causing the demographic change, the economic power. Every day, Western Canada becomes more crucial to the viability of Canada's economy than it's ever been before.
And yet the Laurentian elite still withhold
and they act
a certain amount of power.
As we say in the book, they act as though it's something to be managed, as opposed to a true partner in Confederation.
So tell me, John, what is the health? How would you rate the health and happiness of the Laurentian elite? A term I believe you guys coined.
John did.
John coined all those years ago. How do they stand today?
I think just to carry on with Darrell's point and to answer yours.
Sure.
If you ask Laurentian elite, they would say we continue to grapple with the two solitudes. But if you actually diagnose the country today, I wish I'd thought of this, it suffers from multiple personality disorder.
Yes.
That's because you could very well have a referendum on sovereignty in Quebec by the end of this decade. At the same time, you're having a referendum on sovereignty
double referendum
in Alberta.
But for very different reasons, very different ballot questions. One's kind of holding on to what existed, that old version of Quebec, and the other one is recognizing the new power of a new region in the country. We should have wrote this.
Yeah.
We did, actually. We just didn't use that exact wording.
Yeah. One of the things you guys confront and say one of the biggest issues facing this country, in fact, you say it's former Prime Minister Trudeau's biggest failure is immigration. Why is that his biggest failure, John?
We had the best competitive advantage in the world. We were just about the only country that loved to bring in hundreds of thousands of immigrants every year. And as we wrote in An Empty Planet, all the developed countries have a real crisis with low fertility rates and aging societies. Canada could supplement the lack of babies by bringing in every year 250,000 people. We did it selfishly. They were well educated. They had great economic prospects. They contributed to our society. They made us a more diverse society. They made us an exciting polyglot. Toronto is the most cosmopolitan city in the world, and up until very recently, the majority of Canadians loved this. They supported high levels of immigration. Everybody else was getting more and more nativist and throwing up walls, and we were happily bringing in more immigrants every year. And then we lost control of the system completely. Now, I never actually opposed the idea of increasing the permanent resident cap to 250 to 500,000. The population was growing. We needed the bodies. The same process was in place to very carefully select them. But then we let the temporary foreign worker program spiral completely out of control. And that was only a shadow of the incredible abuse of the international students program, which was the actual core of our immigration system. And then we got floods of people claiming asylum crossing the border. And all of a sudden, Statistics Canada said, hey, did you know there were all these millions of people in the country that had not been accounted for previously? And I'm quite certain that when they came out with that report, the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office said, what? And the worst of all of that is, for the first time, we started to see polls showing that a majority of people said there were too many immigrants coming into the country. And it's not because suddenly there's racism and intolerance rising in Canada. It's because there are too many immigrants coming into the country.
I don't know what's more concerning, if it was done on purpose or by accident.
Well,
Suddenly you're looking behind you. That's what we have to sort of parse as we write history books like this one, right?
So John's point in all of this, and well, he makes his own points very well, but I'll just add something else in. The prerequisite is a well-managed immigration system that works on behalf of Canadians. We lost the plot on that, and
They're not confident in the system.
No,
anymore.
that's what this is. In fact, we wrote a piece in the Globe and Mail a couple of weeks ago, and exactly the argument we said: compare Canada to the United States, compare Canada to the UK. The difference is the argument isn't about the immigrants themselves. The actual argument is about the people managing the process. That's the difference here in this country, and their intentions and their competence and in all the things that are related to good management of anything. And that's the real shame here. It's something that we actually did to ourselves.
You talk about diversity. Diversity is our strength was a mantra of the last government.
Oh, that's such baloney. Can we please just stop saying
You say diversity can be a challenge, and in some ways mismanaged, it can be a weakness.
Ask the Austro-Hungarian Empire whether diversity was their strength.
So, guys, how do you guys view diversity? How should it be managed, understood, for us to get that secret sauce again here in this country?
Well, I think when diversity is people coming from all parts of the world, China, India, and Philippines being the top three, but also from the Caribbean, from the Middle East, from every country on the planet, coming here for two reasons. A, they want to get ahead, and we can offer them an opportunity to get ahead. And B, they believe in the fundamental values of the country. And you can argue what those values are, but it's, we know what everybody outside Canada knows what Canada's values are. People in Canada may wonder what they are, but they know what it is they're coming to. A compassionate society with rule of law, but economic opportunity, and a sort of strict intolerance for intolerance. And that mantra is strength. There is a diverse population unified in the core beliefs of the country, and that strengthens the country. But when you start to get competing ideologies, regional alienation, huge fights between provincial governments and the federal government, and a sense that Canada is in fact not something even to be proud of anymore, something to be apologized for rather than to be celebrated, then that diversity ceases to be strength. It starts to become a weakness.
I spoke to former Immigration Minister Jason Kenney last year, and something he told me was when he was minister, the immigrants he spoke to were hungry for a Canadian story. When they were doing their citizenship tests and, taking their oath to the Queen, they were desperate to have the story told to them so they could tell it to others. Is that the sense you get, that you need? I don't know. There's sort of a hunger for that.
Well, there may be for new Canadians coming in that are absolutely committed to living here and not changing the place and actually assimilating to what Canada is. But we're having a really hard struggle with young people, and this is something that we wrote about in the book, which is that sure, we have these horizontal cleavages in the country, but there's also a big vertical cleavage, and that big vertical cleavage is generational, and we have a whole generation, 2 generations actually, it's millennials and Gen Z, but even slightly older than that, who are saying, you know what, that Canadian promise that paid off for my parents and grandparents isn't paying off for me.
Well,
What
yeah,
I thought I was going to have in my life at this stage of my life, or what I can aspire to, is limited. It's not expanding. We are not going to improve on the previous generation.
what's concerning is we now have like Canadian economic migrants leaving this country to go to the U.S. because they see opportunities elsewhere. I have a friend who's now leaving for San Francisco from Toronto to San Francisco from Toronto. But let me quibble with, like, if we want to be the best citizens we can be, shouldn't we not be citizens of convenience, and that we should want to make the country the best version of itself? For example, the Poles who dug themselves out of the rubble of Warsaw, the young people there, they didn't sort of give up. They built the thing back up again. They realized that they had to be part of the solution, and you had to not be a brain drain statistic, and you had to like build back the nation. Isn't that really part of patriotism? Or you're saying the hand we've dealt them is just so bad that there's no wonder they're giving up?
What they're telling us when we go do surveys, and by the way, it's reflected in the statistics of their lives too.
Yeah.
I mean, the cost of housing, aspirational housing in this country is ridiculous. But what they're telling us in our surveys is, I can put in all of the effort that you talk about, and it's not going to pay off.
This is the thing that Polyev talks about, right? When he talks to young people, the thing he hears is that they say, I've done all the things. I ticked all the boxes that you're supposed to do to gain whatever, the good life, Canadian dream, whatever we want to call it. And yet
And
I'm
we
living
said-
in my parents' basement.
And we said, well, and by the way, 47% of people under the age of 35 in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto Area, live with their parents, which is a shocking statistic. But I mean, so they say that. And then the answer from the city of Toronto is, ooh, we need to build a downtown just like Amsterdam. And you're going to live in this, little flat, and it's going to be perfect. And you're going to ride on your bicycle. And these people are saying, I just want the kind of house that I grew up in.
So tell me, but you guys are an exception. Like, let's put everything on the table. I'm 34 years old. How old are you guys?
64.
70.
So there are colleagues of yours who don't understand this. There are boomers that they don't have, maybe they have kids, so they kind of have an inkling of understanding. But how are you guys, you do it in the book, but how are you explaining to folks your age that, like, this is a serious issue? This is not like the challenges we faced when it came to our generation.
Well, I think
What do you say?
part of the root of it is a lack of understanding that there's a Laurentian understanding that we are downtowns and hinterlands. We are not. There's a small population that lives in downtowns. There's a small population that lives in hinterlands. And there's an enormous population, about more than 2/3 of the country, that lives in suburbs. We are a suburban nation. We are a nation of 3-bedroom houses with backyards. Our governments, including our municipal governments, seem to want to deny that reality. I think we can talk about, because the book does not just lament. The book has a whole series of prescriptions.
Yes, it's not just a lament for a nation; it's a solution for a nation.
A solution for a nation.
Yeah.
It's a love story to a nation in many ways, yeah.
It's
a romance,
that as well.
comedy,
But just practically, what we keep hearing about densification, infills, and all of that. No. COVID proved one thing. It proved that everybody wants a 3-bedroom house with a backyard. People want a barbecue. And yes, you can have condo towers, and yes, you can have densification. You should. Should have all of those good things. But we also need to sprawl. And I know that's the most politically incorrect thing you can possibly say. It's probably the most heretical notion in the book. But if your generation is to get what my generation got, then you have to be able to buy a house. It might be quite far out from the downtown. Now, it might not require the 2-hour commute into the city. We can create new hubs and new ways of working and working virtually. But we cannot just expect your generation to either live in a 650 square foot condo, and good luck having a family there, or living in your parents' basements. That's just not acceptable.
But what do you say to the counter argument? The suburbs aren't that fun either. There doesn't seem to be really that much community. You're surrounded by strip malls.
How many people in the suburbs say that? I mean, you're absolutely right. The progressive elites in the downtowns look at the suburbs as something you have to drive through to get to the cottage.
Yes.
But it's the country. The 905 is the country, not the 416, not the 705. At least in Ontario, the 905 is the country. And it's not Vancouver and Kelowna. It's Burnaby and Surrey and all the suburban cities surrounding Vancouver as well. And you can look at every city in the country, and that's the case. A small downtown, populated by elites, a hinterland, and a vast majority of people living in suburban communities who just seem to be ignored.
You
So
guys
can I
write
just-
sprawl baby sprawl. That's
Can I
one of the
just
lines.
add something
Yeah.
to that? It's this talking past each other, which was the
Yeah.
wrench and elite issue that we got us into originally, the big shift. But when it's the suburbs and the downtowns, both of them are looking at each other and saying, I can't imagine anybody wanting
Yes.
to
Well,
live
I
that
get
way.
it. Yeah.
It's something that I would have to endure, except the difference is that the downtown elites are the ones with the hammer, and they're trying to force the people who are in that other situation, who are aspiring to live in the suburban situation, to change. It's not the suburban people trying to force the downtown people to change the way
Some
they
people
live.
would quibble
There's a-
here in
there's a
Toronto
moral- there's
over
a
bike
moral-
lanes when it comes to that.
Yeah,
That
but this
they're
is- this
affecting,
is-
now that we have amalgamation, they're
So bike
telling us what to
lanes
do.
and all that kind of stuff, they're not transportation solutions. The people on bicycles are probably people who came off of transit. One of the things that drives me the craziest about the bike lanes debate are there are no data. It's all values. If you
Well,
actually,
this is Darrell. We need you to go into the field. You got to be
but
doing this.
when
Anymore,
you,
but-
when you look at
I
the
want you
data-
guys on a bicycle built for two, and then after
Well,
that,
we got it right
run
here.
Some
It's-
numbers.
Any more than we look at incredibly low productivity numbers, weak employment, declining cities, and you turn on the electronic equivalent of your newspaper, and what is your city council talking about? The tearing down of the Johnny MacDonald statue,
Yeah.
the renaming of streets, the renaming of entire universities. Whether or not we should do those things, and I don't think we should, they should not be occupying more than 7 minutes of council's time. And because the council should be thinking about how can we lower development charges? How can we lower property taxes? How can we improve services at the same time? How can we deliver garbage better? And how can we get new subdivisions built? And that's all the council should be caring about, and provincial governments and federal governments. That's where the people are, and that's where the problems are.
Let's talk about the parties and movements that are going to hopefully steer us through this like iceberg alley of issues that you guys lay out in the book. We'll start with the Conservatives, who are probably most infuriated by the things you just discussed. Liberals have been in power for a decade now. Poilievre was the heir apparent. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Darrell. At one point, 25 points ahead when it comes to the Conservatives.
Yeah, I think we made them have but double digits. Well
Exactly.
into, yes.
And yet they lost. Liberal parties governed for the last 87 of 129 years. 62% of prime ministers are liberal. What is the message that the Canadian right should take from losing on election night a few months ago?
Okay. Well, first of all, adjust those statistics from the year 2000,
Okay.
which, by the way, just keep in mind, is 25 years ago.
You can even go back to the 80s. 10 years Mulroney, 10
no,
years
the conservative
Chrétien, 10 years
record's
Harper.
actually quite a bit better. So there is a very divided nation. So if you look at the election map in this country on the last election here in 2025, it's very clear who voted for one party, and it's very clear who voted for the other party. The problem with that is both solutions have a big hole, and that big hole makes it very difficult for them to bring the country together. So what we talk about in general, before we talk specifically about the parties and what their challenges are, is can we create a national political movement for Canadians that will be truly national representation? I think that's the biggest problem that we're dealing with politically at the moment when it comes to electoral politics.
And then in terms of advice, you say be pragmatic, push aside the anger. And what was the third one I'm missing?
Well, John wrote about the Conservatives. I wrote about the Progressives. So why don't you?
Yeah, it was basically don't be crazy.
Don't be great. Now, I have to quibble with that because, there's some, I read that and I get it. There, you talk about people who believe in like Jewish conspiracies and they like fully reject equality and stuff. But I read that and I was like, is this not the divisive language that Hillary Clinton had with her basket of deplorables, that Trudeau had with fringe minority? Like, do we not divide an already divided nation when we're categorizing people like that? What do you think, John?
The Conservative coalition can win elections.
Yeah.
And we know that because they won 3 under Stephen Harper, and that really was the Conservative coalition, right? The 905 and the West, that's the Conservative coalition. And Harper put it together and won it. And Andrew Scheer won his election by popular vote, and Aaron O'Toole won his election by popular vote.
Yeah.
And Pierre Poilievre was, as you say, 20 points plus in December of last year ahead. And then Chrystia Freeland and that letter, and then Trudeau's being pushed up by his own caucus, and then Trump arriving and saying, annexation. Oh, by the way, and tariffs if you don't. Suddenly, a bunch of Canadians who were ready to go with Poilievre said, my property values are at risk. My home equity is at risk. I even have some kind of a mild affection for the country. So elbows up, everyone, elbows up. And then by a very narrow margin, the Liberals win the election. But the point we make in the book is the Conservative coalition doesn't need to feel that it is in perpetual eclipse. In fact, since we published the book, another Liberal provincial government has fallen. There's only one. Because Yukon has gone, as well as Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yes.
So there was one Liberal provincial territorial government in the entire country, and it's New Brunswick. So that's not bad. And if you can just translate Conservative principles from the provincial level to the federal level, as Stephen Harper so successfully did, while making sure that it's targeted to federal issues rather than to provincial ones, then the Conservatives should be able to win elections. You don't need to burn down the House just because you lost that freak election of April 2025. You just need to get some things right.
Can Poilievre do that, though? Like, your pieces of advice, is he someone that you think can actually change Darrell and bring about a win in doing so?
Well, there are models of people who've done this successfully, and the best one was Stephen Harper. He lost the election in a very similar way, not with the same exact characters, but lost the minority to Paul Martin back in 2004, went away for 6 months, reflected, and came back and was a very different type of leader.
This is the thing I hear from Conservatives, though, is that to be pragmatic, does it mean sacrificing your beliefs, in that you're forced to move in a different direction? And
okay, so you can be all about your beliefs and lose every election, and losers don't legislate. I mean, so
this is
you
the
have
NDP question.
Yeah, well, but so I get that, and I read columns like this and all. It's like, guys, if you want to actually change the country in a certain direction, you have to win. And that means that there is no purity in anything here. Canadian politics is about compromise. If there's anything that this book is about, it's about the compromises that are necessary to keep this country together. The founder of the conservative movement in this country was the king of the half-full glass. He was the guy who negotiated all of this. So Pierre Poilievre, if he's not prepared to do that kind of thing, Canadians will make the decision for him.
Just one other piece on the right is that, John, like, the sense I get too is, like, you don't want anger, but like the anger is where the action is. It's the animating characteristic of conservative movements across the West now. They are frustrated by what they see as like institutions being taken over by the progressive left. They haven't had their hands on the levers of powers for years now, and they're angry. So like, what should they do with that anger, if not express it?
Channel it. Because yes, there are populist conservative movements taking power around the Western world, and they're wrecking their countries. Those populist conservative governments don't do well or last long. Look what's happening in the United States, and look what could be happening in countries in Europe, and has already happened in Hungary. We don't want to be that. We're Canada. We want to reconcile. We want to compromise while holding to principles. And you can do that. You can deregulate. You can cut red tape. You can stimulate private sector growth. You can get out of the provincial government's hair, because that's half the problems when Ottawa tries to interfere in with provincial governments. All good principled things that don't turn us into haters. Because they're
going to want to do cultural things, though, too, John. They want to get their hands on DEI programs. They want to change the face of the country. It's not all economics from where they see it.
Hate at its very highest is like 40. We saw what the hate party was in the last election campaign. What did Maxime Bernier get? I mean,
I think it was 1%.
Yeah, I mean, so there's the Tories need to find 5. There's not 5% more haters out there.
And again, it's the 905. If you want to win, and I'm sorry, I know this angers some people in the West, and I get it, but the Conservative Coalition has 2 components. The first is Western voters, urban, rural, suburban, you name it, the prairies, the interior of BC. The second is the suburban communities of the Lower Mainland and Greater Toronto. That's where every single election is won or lost in the 905 and in the Lower Mainland suburban communities. You go into those ridings, most of them are either majority immigrant or majority non-white or very, very high minorities. So you go in there and rant about DEI and rant about getting your hands on the levers of power and watch your vote evaporate. because and again, this is something that's unique to Canada. We are, correct me if I'm wrong, we're heading towards 40% non-white.
Yeah, we're
Overall, certainly almost 25% of the country was not even born in this country. 25% of the Canadians, citizens, voters in this country were not born in Canada. You cannot take that message and deliver it to those people and expect to become government.
Or at least don't put it in the front of your shop window. Do the stuff,
what,
but
Pierre
don't
Poilievre,
make it part of your policy.
Pierre Poilievre was going to win that election because he actually didn't do that. What he did was he focused on cost of living. He was going to get rid of the GST. He was going to get
On
rid
housing.
He was going to get rid of the gatekeepers. He was going to, he got rid of the carbon tax. By the way, John, I think recently in a column said, or maybe we said it together, was, he should, Mark Carney should get charged for theft for all the things that he took from the conservative
Yes,
platform.
I think the line was.
John, you're going to get in trouble. People have been in trouble
The line was that Carney stole so much of the Conservative platform, police should have laid charges.
Yeah, so he had a winning agenda. What he ran into, if the message out of the election campaign, for all of you listening who are very ideologically inclined, if the message that you got out of the election campaign was that you were not ideologically enough, you got the wrong message. The message that you should have got out of the election campaign was we did pretty well because we focused on the issues that 905 voters were focused on. That's when Pierre Poilievre was doing his best. And we ran into a fluke windstorm. I mean, if Justin Trudeau doesn't resign and Pierre Poilievre runs as the Conservative candidate, he's the prime minister. If Justin Trudeau does resign, and Mark Carney becomes the prime minister and Kamala Harris wins, Pierre Poilievre wins the election campaign. Again, you needed those two things to happen.
We'll call it an orange swan event.
Well, yeah. So those two things happen,
yeah.
And all of a sudden the conditions change. And even though they did change, you lose by 3. Don't throw out the progress that you were making by focusing on what it is that particularly younger Canadians are looking for.
And I think we need to stress here a bit that, first of all, the book talks as much. Yes, we are very down on the Trudeau government because it had bad policies. But that doesn't make this book a conservative rant.
No.
There's as much progressive as conservative in here. There's a whole chapter on Indigenous relations. There are solutions that we put forward that people on the left would embrace and people on the right would hate. And we spend as much time talking about the future of the progressive movement as we do about the conservative movement, in part because the progressive movement at one level is in more trouble than the conservative.
Well, let's get into that. Before we get to solutions, I just want to touch on the progressive side of things. If the conservatives need to ditch their anger, you say the left needs to ditch its moralizing. Can you give us a sense of what that looks like?
More to the point, the progressives need, it's not a question of moralizing. The progressives need to realize that we are a two-party system. And the fact that we're not a two-party system at the federal level, in the long run, is going to be bad for progressives. Because again, if you look at the provinces, they've all pretty much become two party systems. We have the NDP in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, and British Columbia. We have some version of Conservatives just about everywhere else. And now, Mark Carney has gotten just a few more votes at a few more seats to get a minority government. But in the long run, progressives need to look at what's happening at the provincial level and what's happening around the world and ask themselves, what are we going to have to do to unite? So I grew up as a journalist in the Unite the Right movement. I think we suspect, Darrell, I think we can say this together, that we both believe that Unite the Left is going to be as much a dominant issue going forward as Unite the Right.
You said they were going to unite. They united informally, I guess, confidence and supply agreement.
Exactly.
We can kind of see that as a uniting in a way.
So our argument is that actually, if you look at what Justin Trudeau did, he really only won one election. It was 2015. The other two elections, basically progressives won because they won enough votes with the NDP and the Liberal Party to govern together. And we describe it in the book as being like, while the Tories got married, the Progressive Conservatives and the whatever it was at the time, the version of the Canadian Alliance at the time, they decided that they were formally going to get together. These guys are, as progressives would do, they didn't get married, they're just living together.
You say Trudeau campaigned from the left, governed further from the left.
Yes.
Where's Carney governing from?
he's looking actually more like Stephen Harper in terms of the way he's governing. I mean, Aaron O'Toole, if Pierre Poilievre's upset about the stealing of policies, I mean, Aaron O'Toole stole even probably more from Aaron O'Toole's policies. But I would say that at the moment, he's looking more like a Stephen Harper type government. But at the moment, you can't see that being able to endure as the character of the Liberal Party itself, rather than the personality of one person, defines what this government is going to be going forward.
What do you think, John?
Well, I think we say in the book that the progressives must unite, and maybe at the federal level, they're uniting by the complete elimination of the NDP, because it's essentially the NDP was the crutch to keep the Liberals going in the second government of Trudeau and the third government of Trudeau. In fact, they were, for all intents and purposes, a coalition in the third government. And now the NDP has been so marginalized that they are at risk of extinction. So it could be that we have a dominant Liberal Party, or it could be, and it could be that the NDP, what's left of it, says we're going to have to find some way to work with these guys. Or it could be that the NDP has a resurgence. What happens to the progressives when the NDP surges? Conservatives get elected. So it's in the self-interest of the progressives to ask themselves tough questions. Do we put all our eggs in the Liberal basket? Maybe. Or do we find some way of living together in some kind of coalition? Maybe. But one way or another, federally and provincially, the progressive movement is not going to win unless it becomes dominant, and that means suppressing or uniting under one banner.
Does it still have that tone, though? I just want to get back to that. This you describe it in the book, this idea that if you don't care about the carbon tax, you don't care about the environment. This sort of talking down to, we know what's best for Canadians. If you're not with us, you're against us. There's only one type of... I hate when any politician says, Canadians want.
No, you're
as
not,
if you're speaking
you're
behalf
not
of...
accusing the Liberal Party of hypocrisy, right? You're not saying that the very same cabinet that stood beaming behind Mark Carney at Rideau Hall when he killed the carbon tax was the cabinet that implemented the carbon tax.
Yes, but they were being pragmatic, guys.
But
I don't know.
To give Carney a lot of credit on this, I think that he's really changed the tone of this government. You don't see him saying that. I haven't seen any indication of him doing the same type of moralizing as Justin Trudeau. So from a leadership and communications perspective, this government is tonally different from the previous government. But from between 2015 and 2025, the amount of damage that was done to this country, on the three things that we say are the most important things for any government and any prime minister to be really performing well on: the status of the economy, our national unity, and finally our relationship with the United States. We can't be looking back at that period of time as being advancing the country's interests on any of them. And I will add in a fourth, and if 1, 2, 3 didn't work as well as it did, sort of in terms of being able to make a point, adding in a fourth, what was done in terms of our national identity and pride in the country was something else that was not better when this government changed leaders.
Just a couple more questions. You say, if this is not dealt with decisively by our leaders, that Canadians will face deteriorating qualities of their lives. Are we at that point, John?
I don't think the Carney government has grasped the need for deregulation. I mean, there are good things in the November budget, great things about defense if money actually gets spent. I'm not certain of where they are on infrastructure, and I don't see a lot that says, bring $100 to the table and we can get you a sign on your door tomorrow. And so I don't think there's that sense of urgency in deregulation. So no, I'm holding. I'm not ready to pronounce on Carney as economic reformer. There's again, there are people smarter than me say that there are good things in that budget if they get carried through in the second year and in the third year. But we have to wait for that.
Solutions. One solution you put forward is dispersing ministries across the country, getting people out of that Ottawa bubble. What else would you add to that list, just briefly, in terms of what we can do somewhat quickly? It feels like, the alarm bells are going, but we really haven't done that much. I don't know how many interprovincial trade barriers have been broken in the last few months, but is there anything we can do quickly that won't take so long, Darrell?
Well, the answer is zero. But let's not pass over that one that you passed over so quickly. That one is really, really central to the argument that we're making. That to govern the country, you have to be in the country. And, the problems that we've always had in terms of Canadian national unity have always been delivered by federal government, generally overreach, where they start intruding in the activities of provincial governments. That has to stop. And then the other thing is, if Ottawa truly wants to represent the country, it has to be out in the country. So why is Parks Canada not in Banff? I mean, why does it need to be in Ottawa? Why is the whatever cultural institutions, Heritage Canada? John's suggesting he likes Saskatoon for some reason.
I want to see the Canada Council relocate to Saskatoon. I think it'd be hilarious. In essence, what we're recommending is that everything that's within exclusive federal jurisdiction stays in Ottawa. So defense stays and justice stays and finance stays. But everything that's in either shared jurisdiction or it really belongs to the provinces primarily, health, environment, agriculture, fisheries, heritage, even immigration, should be taken out and moved to other parts of the country. And not just move some of the lower people out, but the minister, the deputy minister, everybody is in that city. We can, if they can cast votes virtually, they can have cabinet meetings virtually. And we think it would do two great things. It would tell Ottawa more about what's happening in the country because the minister is living in Saskatoon and is getting in a hearing in the supermarket what people in Saskatoon are thinking. And it would have people in other parts of the country see the federal government in their communities, in their provinces, doing federal things, but doing federal things where they live. I think it could be quite a unifying notion.
It is strange. It's the second biggest country in the world, and yet, everything is concentrated in one, the greater Ottawa region.
By people who never rotate, they never leave. They start their career there and they end their career there. They don't really spend any time in the rest of the country, and all the jobs of consequence are a few minutes walk from Parliament Hill.
And I think I'll make this pitch there because I know we're running out. There are some big ideas in this book. Ones that are going to, yes, sprawl, baby, sprawl is one. Move the federal government out into the communities is another. Get back into constitutional reform, perhaps, and get.
Good luck.
Make the provincial federal relations the council. What's it called?
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
So he's talking about the Council of Federation.
Yeah,
Council of the Federation.
Council of Federation.
Anybody who's prepared to stand up and say that the Senate does the job that it is supposed to do. And by the way, if I hear one more person say, the place of sober second thought, that is not the purpose of the Senate in Canada. The purpose of the Senate in Canada is regional representation. That's why they're selected on that basis.
And one final addition to that, and again, it'll be heretical, at least for the Laurentian elites. If we're going to move departments out of Ottawa, then perhaps we can also remove the bilingualism requirement, so that people who, because only 18% of this country is bilingual. So maybe
claims that on the census, not contested.
So maybe we get people, new Canadians, rural Canadians, farmers, business people, get them into the public service and say you can go up to deputy minister if you want because you're not in a department that requires full bilingualism. There'll be bilingual element in your department, but you're in Saskatoon. The Canada Council can live without some French for a while.
That would certainly expand hiring practices.
Plus AI translation and everything that's going on these days. I run a global business, right? I can tell you, I'm talking to people and reading documents and things all over the world with fairly instantaneous translation and losing nothing as a result of being able to do it.
Yeah, it certainly slows things down. Just lastly, are you guys optimistic? You finish a book like this, you're doing a tour, you're engaging with the public now. You're going out into the communities in various parts of the country to get a sense of how people feel. Are you optimistic, and are you getting the sense that Canadians are optimistic, or are we still kind of pessimistic about all this?
I think the danger is that Canadians could become terminally pessimistic. We have data about the large number of people under 40 who would be prepared to talk about annexation with the United States if the terms were good enough.
Yeah.
And then, they're angry that they're going to be the first generation in history of this country who did not live as well as the generation that came before. So that's the pessimism. The optimism, we've gotten through worse. We got through the conscription crises. We got through the separation crises. We got through the debt crisis of the 1990s. And we did great things along the way. We built the Transcontinental Railway. We built the Seaway. We built the airports. We've created a satellite revolution. There are lots of things that we have done in the past that suggest that if we'll just get our act together, we can do it again. So in that sense, I'm optimistic.
Are you optimistic? It seems like some of the things you listed it seem like they're in the distant past. It never feel, I don't know, it feels like we haven't done anything great lately. Are we going to do great things lately,
One
guys?
of the lowest mortality rates of COVID in the world.
Okay, there we go. That's one.
Okay, so I think today, the day that we're taping, I think I saw it somewhere today that it's Leonard Cohen's birthday. And we quote Leonard Cohen, great Canadian poet, songwriter, in the book, and we say, the crack is how the light gets in, from one of his songs, and it's like we're at that breaking point, we're at that crack. It's going to let the light in. We are going to come out, hopefully, through all of this process, a better Canada. Both John and I are, very strong Canadian patriots. The book to us is a cri de coeur for our country. It's because we're optimistic about the potential for the future of this country. If we get the things right that we're talking about in the book, if people read what we're talking about, maybe they don't agree with any one of the solutions, but it's the conversation that's important. And that crack is happening right now, and I'm hoping that the light does come in.
And this is one of those conversations.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, so you can find that conversation, Breaking Point, the new book by Darrell Bricker, John Ibbitson, who joined us here on Hub Dialogues. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. I really appreciate it.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.